This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
The children's world shattered with a deafening crash. Their father's sudden arrest tore apart the fabric of their comfortable London life, leaving them adrift in a sea of confusion and heartbreak. Roberta, Peter, and Phyllis huddled together in the drawing room, their small bodies pressed close as if to shield each other from the invisible storm raging around them. The tick-tock of the grandfather clock seemed to grow louder with each passing second, its steady rhythm a stark contrast to their racing hearts. The air felt thick and heavy, laden with unspoken fears and questions. Their mother, usually a beacon of calm and strength, paced the room like a caged lioness. Her footsteps echoed on the polished wooden floor, each step a thunderclap in the tense silence. The children watched her with wide, anxious eyes, noting how her hands trembled, and her face seemed to have aged years in mere hours. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, cracking like dry leaves underfoot. "My darlings, we must leave our home. Pack only what you need. We're going on an adventure." The word adventure hung in the air, a fragile bubble of hope in the midst of their shattered world. The children exchanged glances, a flicker of excitement momentarily overshadowing their fear. But the absence of their father loomed large, casting long shadows over their tentative enthusiasm. As they hurriedly stuffed their belongings into worn leather suitcases, questions bubbled up like a boiling kettle. Why was father taken away? Where were they going? When would they return? But their mother's tight-lipped expression and the tears she tried to hide behind forced smiles told them now was not the time for answers. The journey to their new home felt like sailing through a thick, impenetrable fog. The familiar streets of London, with their bustling crowds and towering buildings, gave way to rolling countryside. Each mile that passed beneath the train's wheels took them further from the life they knew, from the comfort of routine and the security of home. Roberta, the eldest, pressed her nose against the cool glass of the train window. She watched as the city faded away, like a half-remembered dream, replaced by a patchwork of green fields and ancient woodlands. The changing landscape mirrored the turmoil in her heart, a mix of fear for the unknown future, and a tiny spark of curiosity about what lay ahead. Peter, always the practical one, clutched his toy engine to his chest, his mind whirred with possibilities, each more fantastic than the last. Perhaps their father was on a secret mission, like in the adventure books he loved to read. Maybe they were going to live in a castle, or by the sea, or in a magical forest. These thoughts helped to keep the worry at bay, if only for a moment. Phyllis, the youngest, clung to her mother's hand as if it were a lifeline. Her small face was a canvas of conflicting emotions. Fear, excitement, confusion, and sadness all vying for dominance. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew that everything had changed, and that scared her more than anything. As the train chugged along, the landscape transformed before their eyes. The air grew fresher, carrying the scent of wildflowers and freshly cut grass. The children breathed deeply, their lungs filling with the crisp country air, so different from the smoky London atmosphere they were used to. Finally, they arrived at a small, sleepy station that seemed to have been plucked straight from the pages of a storybook. The platform was empty save for a few chirping sparrows and a station master who looked as if he had stepped out of time itself. He tipped his hat and offered a warm smile, a stark contrast to the indifferent faces they had grown accustomed to in the city. A short walk led them to their new home, a quaint cottage that seemed to have grown organically from the surrounding hills. Its thatched roof and whitewashed walls stood in stark contrast to their grand London house, yet there was something inviting about its simplicity. Wildflowers dotted the path leading to the front door, their cheerful colors a welcome sight after the long journey. As they crossed the threshold, the musty scent of disuse mingled with the sweet fragrance of wildflowers placed in a vase by some unseen caretaker. The children explored the rooms, their footsteps echoing in the unfamiliar space. Each creak of the floorboards and rattle of the windows in the breeze seemed to whisper secrets of past inhabitants. That night, as they lay in their new beds, the silence of the countryside pressed in around them like a thick blanket. The distant hoot of an owl and the gentle rustling of leaves replaced the familiar city sounds. Roberta, Peter, and Phyllis huddled together, finding comfort in each other's presence. Their mother sat on the edge of the bed, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a candle. She stroked their hair and spoke softly, her words a soothing balm to their troubled hearts. "Remember, my loves, that no matter where we are, we're together, and that's what truly makes a home." As sleep finally claimed them, the children's dreams were filled with images of their father, the mystery of his absence, and the promise of new adventures in this strange, beautiful place. They didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but they faced it together, a small family unit bound by love and hope in an unfamiliar world. Just as dawn began to break, casting a pale light through the cottage windows, a sharp knock at the door jolted them awake. Their mother's face paled as she hurried to answer it, leaving the children to wonder, had their father returned, or was this the beginning of yet another upheaval in their already tumultuous lives? The children were grappling with the challenges of their new life in the countryside. Their world had been turned upside down, and they were struggling to find their footing in this unfamiliar landscape. Bobbie, Peter, and Phyllis trudged along an overgrown path, their shoes squelching in the mud. Each step a reminder of how far they were from the neat pavements of London. The lush green fields stretched out before them like a vast alien sea, dotted with unfamiliar wildflowers that bobbed their heads in the gentle breeze. The air was thick with the scent of grass and earth, so different from the acrid city air they'd left behind. As they crested a small hill, a faint rumbling in the distance caught their attention. It was a sound unlike anything they'd heard since arriving in this strange new world. Curiosity piqued, they quickened their pace, following the sound until they stumbled upon a clearing. There, nestled between two rolling hills, lay a set of gleaming railway tracks. The sight hit them like a bolt of lightning, a sudden connection to the world they'd left behind. "Look!" Bobbie exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. "A real railway, right here in the middle of nowhere." Peter's face lit up, his earlier gloom evaporating like morning mist. "I wonder where it goes," he mused, his mind already racing with possibilities. Phyllis, ever the optimist, clapped her hands in delight. "Maybe we'll see a train," she squealed, bouncing on her toes like an excited puppy. As if summoned by her words, a distant whistle pierced the air. The children held their breath, hearts pounding in unison, as a magnificent steam engine came into view. Its polished black body gleamed in the sunlight, a stark contrast to the verdant landscape. Clouds of white steam billowed from its chimney, creating a misty halo that trailed behind, like a bridal veil. Without thinking, the children raised their hands and waved enthusiastically at the passing carriages. To their surprise and delight, several passengers waved back, their faces blurred, but their gestures clear through the windows. "Did you see that?" Peter exclaimed, his voice trembling with excitement. "They waved back at us." From that moment on, a new ritual was born. Every day, come rain or shine, the children would make their way to the railway line. They learned the schedule by heart, their internal clocks syncing with the rhythm of the trains. The morning express became their alarm clock, the afternoon local their lunch bell, and the evening mail train their lullaby. As the days passed, their wave became more elaborate. They brought flowers from their garden, waving them like colorful flags in a parade. They made signs with cheerful messages, holding them up for the passengers to read. Each returned wave or smile felt like a small victory, a connection to the outside world they had left behind. For Bobbie, Peter, and Phyllis, the railway became more than just a distraction. It was a lifeline, a thread connecting them to their old life and the promise of adventures to come. The rhythmic chug of the engines and the whoosh of the steam became the soundtrack to their new existence, punctuating their days with moments of excitement and joy. One evening, as they stood by the tracks watching the last train of the day disappear around the bend, Bobbie turned to her siblings with a smile. "You know," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the fading clatter of the train, "I think I'm starting to like it here." Peter nodded in agreement, his eyes still fixed on the spot where the train had vanished. "Me too," he admitted, a hint of surprise in his voice. "It's different, but it's not all bad." Phyllis, ever the optimist, beamed at her older siblings. "I love it here," she declared, her voice ringing out in the quiet evening air. And I love our trains. Do you think they love us back? As they made their way home in the fading light, the children felt a warmth in their hearts that hadn't been there before. The railway had become more than just a pastime. It was a beacon of hope, a promise that even in the face of drastic changes, there were still wonders to be discovered and joys to be found. But as they climbed into their beds that night, a strange sound caught their attention. It wasn't the familiar whistle of a train, but something different, something urgent. Bobbie sat up, her heart racing. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to her siblings. It sounded like a cry for help. Peter and Phyllis nodded, their eyes wide in the darkness. As one, they turned to look out the window, where the moonlit railway tracks stretched out into the night, holding secrets they had yet to uncover. As the days passed, the children found themselves inexorably drawn to the railway. The rhythmic clatter of trains and the bustling activity of the station became a comforting constant in their new lives. Bobbie, Peter, and Phyllis would race down the grassy hill to the railway line, their laughter carried on the warm summer breeze. The sun-warmed wooden fence became their perch, legs swinging freely as they watched the trains go by. The air was thick with the acrid smell of coal smoke and the hiss of steam engines, a stark contrast to the sweet scent of wildflowers in the nearby meadow. It was on one of these visits that they first encountered Perks, the station porter. His face, weathered by years of outdoor work, creased into a kind smile as he approached the curious children. "And what might you young'uns be doing here?" he asked, his voice gruff but warm, like a well-worn blanket. Bobbie, ever the spokesperson, felt her heart race as she explained their fascination with the trains. Her words tumbled out, fueled by excitement and a touch of nervousness. Perks listened intently, his eyes twinkling with understanding. From that day on, he became their guide to the world of railways, sharing stories of far-off places and explaining the intricate workings of the station. The children hung on his every word, their imaginations soaring with each tale. In their minds, they could see the bustling cities and rolling countryside Perks described. They could almost taste the exotic foods and feel the thrill of adventure. Perks, in turn, found joy in their company, their youthful enthusiasm a bright spot in his routine days. He'd often slip them little treats, a shiny apple or a piece of toffee, when no one was looking, his rough hands gentle as he passed them the small treasures. As the weeks went by, the railway became more than just a source of entertainment. It transformed into a lifeline to the world beyond their quiet village, a reminder of the bustling life they'd left behind in London. The children would wave at passing trains, feeling a connection to the passengers rushing by on their own adventures. Each passing carriage was a story waiting to be told, a mystery to be unraveled. It was during one of these waving sessions that they first caught the eye of the old gentleman. He was a distinguished-looking passenger on the 9:15 train, with a neatly trimmed white beard and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. At first he seemed surprised to see the children, but then his face broke into a warm smile that seemed to light up the entire carriage. From that day on, it became a ritual as sacred as any church service. The children would eagerly await the 9:15, their hearts pounding with anticipation. As it chugged past, they'd wave with all their might, as if their very lives depended on it. The old gentleman would lean out of his window, his hat held firmly on his head, and wave back with equal enthusiasm. The exchange lasted only seconds, but to the children, it felt like a lifetime. This simple act of acknowledgement meant more to the children than they could express. It was as if, for a brief moment each day, they were seen and recognized in a world that had suddenly become so unfamiliar. The old gentleman's wave became a beacon of hope, a reminder that they were not forgotten in this new place. As summer turned to autumn, and the leaves on the trees began to change from vibrant green to fiery reds and golds, the children found themselves feeling more at home. The railway, once just a curiosity, had become the beating heart of their new life. It was a source of friendship, adventure, and connection, binding them to this place in ways they never expected. Bobbie, Peter, and Phyllis would often sit by the fire in the evenings, recounting their day's adventures to their mother. They'd speak of Perks's latest story, or how the old gentleman had tipped his hat to them that morning. Their mother would listen with a soft smile, grateful for the joy her children had found in this unexpected place. But behind her eyes there was a sadness they couldn't quite understand, a secret she kept close to her heart. And so, as the 9:15 train whistled its way through the valley each day, the children felt a sense of belonging wash over them. They were no longer just observers of this new world, but a part of it. The railway had become their anchor, connecting them to their new home and community in ways they never could have imagined. As the days grew shorter and the air cooler, the children's adventures continued. One crisp autumn morning, they set out to explore the countryside, their spirits high and their hearts light. The world seemed full of possibility, each turn in the path promising new discoveries. Little did they know that their carefree adventure was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their new life by the railway. The children were exploring the countryside on a warm summer's day. Their carefree adventure took an unexpected turn when they stumbled upon a shocking sight. The sun beat down on Roberta, Peter, and Phyllis as they crested a grassy hill, their laughter carried away by a gentle breeze, but their mirth died in their throats as they gazed upon the scene before them. A dangerous landslide had occurred on the railway tracks, threatening the safety of any approaching trains. The once sturdy embankment had crumbled away like a sandcastle washed by the tide, leaving a gaping wound in the earth. Rocks and soil spilled across the gleaming rails, transforming the familiar path into a treacherous obstacle course. The air felt thick with tension, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of settling debris. "We have to do something," Roberta exclaimed, her voice trembling with urgency. The weight of responsibility settled on their young shoulders like a heavy cloak, pressing the air from their lungs. Peter, always the practical one, scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowed against the glare of the sun. "Look," he shouted, pointing to a plume of smoke in the distance. "A train's coming!" The children's hearts raced, matching the rhythm of the approaching locomotive. Time seemed to slow as they grappled with the enormity of the situation. Lives hung in the balance, and they were the only ones who could prevent a catastrophe. "Quick!" Phyllis cried, her usual timidity replaced by determination. "We need to warn the driver." As one, they sprang into action. Roberta tore off her red petticoat, the fabric rough against her hands as she waved it frantically like a makeshift flag. Peter scrambled up the embankment, his feet slipping on loose stones as he positioned himself to be seen. The scent of crushed grass and disturbed earth filled his nostrils. Phyllis cupped her hands around her mouth, her shrill voice carrying on the wind. The train rounded the bend, its whistle piercing the air like a banshee's wail. The children redoubled their efforts, a desperate dance of flailing arms and urgent cries. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed their warnings would go unheeded. Then, with a screech of metal on metal that set their teeth on edge, the train began to slow. Brakes squealed in protest as the massive engine fought against its own momentum. Clouds of steam billowed around the locomotive, shrouding it in a ghostly mist that tickled their faces and filled their lungs with the acrid scent of hot metal and coal smoke. As the train ground to a halt mere yards from disaster, a collective sigh of relief washed over the children. They sagged against each other, trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline, their hearts pounding like drums in their chests. The driver leaned out of his cab, his face a mix of confusion and gratitude. "What's all this, then?" he called, his gruff voice softened by dawning realization. In breathless, tumbling words, the children explained the danger. The driver's eyes widened as he took in the scene, and he quickly set about securing the train and alerting his passengers. The hiss of steam and the murmur of confused voices filled the air. Word of the children's heroism spread like wildfire through the carriages. Faces peered out of windows, some etched with fear at their near miss, others beaming with admiration for their young saviors. The air buzzed with excitement and relief. As railway officials arrived to assess the damage and clear the tracks, the children found themselves at the center of a whirlwind of attention. Passengers shook their hands, patted their backs, and pressed sweets and coins into their palms. The station master himself arrived, his usual stern demeanor replaced by genuine warmth as he commended their quick thinking and bravery. Amidst the commotion, Roberta, Peter, and Phyllis exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. This moment, born of fear and chance, had changed them. They stood a little taller, their eyes shining with newfound confidence. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the repaired tracks, the children made their way home. The weight of their achievement settled around them like a warm blanket, filling them with a sense of purpose they had never known before. The path home seemed different now, each step filled with a new significance. The scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed grass tickled their noses, reminding them of the beauty of the world they had helped protect. As they walked, hand in hand, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with courage and determination. Little did they know, their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't have imagined. As they rounded the final bend towards home, they spotted a figure in the distance. It was a man, tall and imposing, walking purposefully towards them. The children exchanged curious glances. Who could this be? And why did he seem to be heading straight for them? The children's lives were about to change in ways they couldn't have imagined. It all began when they encountered Mr. Szczepansky, a Russian exile whose story would touch their hearts and set them on an unexpected journey. The crisp autumn air nipped at their cheeks as Bobbie, Peter, and Phyllis made their way to the railway station. Leaves crunched beneath their feet, a symphony of reds and golds painting the world around them. The familiar scent of coal smoke from passing trains mingled with the earthy aroma of fallen leaves, creating a uniquely comforting smell that the children had come to associate with their new life by the railway. As they rounded the corner, the old oak tree near the station came into view. Its gnarled branches reached toward the sky like arthritic fingers, and huddled beneath it was a figure they had never seen before. The man's threadbare coat hung loosely on his thin frame, and even from a distance, there was an air of desperation about him that made the children's hearts ache. Bobbie, always the bravest, took a tentative step forward. "Are you all right, sir?" she called out, her voice carrying on the breeze. The man's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. For a moment he seemed to shrink back, as if expecting harm, but something in Bobbie's gentle tone must have reassured him, for he slowly began to speak. His words came out in a jumble of broken English and what the children assumed was Russian. But even through the language barrier, the pain in his voice was unmistakable. He spoke of a family left behind, of a life uprooted, of fear and loneliness in a strange land. As he talked, his hands moved expressively, painting pictures in the air of the home and loved ones he had lost. Peter and Phyllis edged closer, their young faces a mixture of fascination and concern. They had read about far-off places in their books. But here was a man who had actually lived through adventures, albeit sad ones, that they could scarcely imagine. "We must do something," Phyllis declared suddenly, her small hands balling into determined fists. Her siblings nodded in agreement, their minds already whirling with possibilities. Over the next few days, the children threw themselves into helping Mr. Szczepansky with a fervor that surprised even themselves. They emptied their piggy banks, sharing their meager savings. They divided their packed lunches, ensuring that the hungry man had something to eat each day. They even managed to convince the kind-hearted station master to allow Mr. Szczepansky to sleep in the warm waiting room on particularly cold nights. But as the days wore on, it became clear that their efforts, while appreciated, were like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teacup. They needed something more, something bigger. It was Peter who remembered the old gentleman, a frequent passenger on their local train who had helped them in the past. His eyes lit up with excitement as he shared his idea with his sisters. "What if we ask him for help? He seems to know everyone and everything." The next day found them waiting anxiously at the station, their hearts pounding in time with the approaching train. As the old gentleman stepped onto the platform, Bobbie summoned all her courage and approached him. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "We need your help." The old gentleman listened intently as Bobbie recounted Mr. Szczepansky's story, his bushy eyebrows furrowing with concern. When she finished, he didn't hesitate for a moment. "Of course I'll help," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "Leave it to me." What followed was a whirlwind of activity that left the children's heads spinning. The old gentleman, true to his word, set his considerable resources to work. Within days, he had not only located Mr. Szczepansky's family, but had also arranged for their safe passage to England. As the day of the reunion approached, the children threw themselves into preparations with renewed energy. They scrubbed the waiting room until it shone, hung cheerful bunting from the rafters, and even managed to procure a small bouquet of late-blooming flowers to brighten the space. The morning of the reunion dawned clear and bright, as if even the weather was celebrating. The children could barely contain their excitement as they waited on the platform, their eyes scanning every approaching train with eager anticipation. And then suddenly there they were. Mr. Szczepansky's family stepped onto the platform, looking tired and bewildered but filled with hope. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Mr. Szczepansky caught sight of them, and the platform erupted with cries of joy. Tears flowed freely as the family embraced, their sobs of happiness echoing through the station. The children watched from a respectful distance, their own eyes glistening with happy tears. In that moment, they understood the true power of compassion and the profound impact of helping others. As the reunited family walked away, hand in hand, the children felt a warmth in their hearts that no chill autumn wind could dispel. They had learned a lesson far more valuable than any taught in school, that even small acts of kindness could change lives in the most extraordinary ways. But as they turned to head home, basking in the glow of their good deed, they noticed a boy about their age watching them curiously from the other end of the platform. There was something familiar about him, though they couldn't quite place it. Little did they know, this chance encounter would lead them on yet another adventure, one that would test their courage and change their lives in ways they could never have imagined. The children's railway adventures had taken an unexpected turn. During one of their excursions, they encountered Jim, the grandson of the old gentleman they had befriended. The day dawned with promise, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers and sun-warmed grass. Bobbie, Peter, and Phyllis perched on their favorite spot near the tracks, their hearts beating in sync with the distant rumble of the approaching train. The gleaming engine emerged from around the bend, sunlight glinting off its polished surface. Bobbie's sharp eyes caught a flash of movement. "Look!" she cried, pointing excitedly. "Is that? Could it be?" Peter squinted against the sun's glare, his face lighting up with recognition. "It's Jim, the old gentleman's grandson." Their voices rose in a chorus of excitement, hands waving frantically as the train clattered past. Jim's familiar face appeared at the window, his grin as bright as the summer sky, as he returned their enthusiastic greeting. As the train disappeared from view, a spark of adventure ignited in the children's hearts. Without a word, they set off along the tracks, gravel crunching beneath their feet. The world seemed full of possibility, each step carrying them closer to the grand adventures they imagined Jim must be having. Their path led them to the mouth of a tunnel, its dark opening yawning before them like a giant's maw. The temperature dropped as they approached, sending a shiver down Phyllis's spine. "Do you think we should go in?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, a faint cry echoed from within the tunnel. The sound sliced through the air, sharp as a knife, raising goosebumps on their arms. Without hesitation, Bobbie plunged into the darkness, her siblings close on her heels. The gloom enveloped them, thick as velvet. As their eyes adjusted, they made out a figure on the ground. Jim, his face contorted in pain, his leg bent at an unnatural angle. Fear radiated from him in palpable waves. "It's all right, Jim," Bobbie soothed, kneeling beside him. Her voice was steady, a lifeline in the oppressive darkness. "We're here to help." The tunnel seemed to press in around them, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and rusted metal. But the children's determination burned bright, their movements swift and purposeful in the face of adversity. Peter's brow furrowed in concentration as he fashioned a makeshift splint from his jacket and nearby debris. His hands, usually fidgety, moved with surprising steadiness. Phyllis, her timidity forgotten, murmured words of comfort to Jim, her gentle touch anchoring him against the waves of pain. Bobbie's mind raced, formulating a plan. Her eyes, adjusting to the dim light, darted around the tunnel, assessing their situation with a maturity beyond her years. "We need to get him out of here," she said, her voice low but firm. Together, on three. With careful movements, they helped Jim to his feet. Each step was a battle, his pained gasps echoing off the tunnel walls. But the children's unwavering support buoyed his spirits, their encouragement as steady as the tracks beneath their feet. As they emerged from the tunnel, the sudden brightness made them blink rapidly. The world outside seemed almost too vibrant after the oppressive darkness. And there, hurrying towards them with a look of mingled concern and relief, was the old gentleman. "My boy," he cried, embracing Jim carefully. His eyes, brimming with gratitude, turned to the children. "You've saved him," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't thank you enough." As Jim was whisked away for medical attention, the children stood together, their faces flushed with exertion and pride. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the railway tracks. In that moment, they realized they had grown. They were no longer just playing at adventures. They were living them, facing real challenges with courage and compassion. As they walked home, hand in hand, a sense of anticipation filled the air. The railway had brought them more than just Jim's rescue. It had awakened something within them, a hunger for more adventures, more challenges to overcome together. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight peeked over the horizon, the children gathered once more by the railway. Their eyes sparkled with excitement as they huddled together in the crisp autumn air. Whispers and giggles filled the space between them, carried on the breeze along with the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. What new adventure awaited them on the tracks today? The children's eyes sparkled with excitement as they huddled together in the crisp autumn air. Whispers and giggles filled the space between them, carried on the breeze along with the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. Bobbie, the eldest, felt a surge of determination course through her veins. She looked at her siblings, her gaze intense and unwavering. "We simply must do something special for Perks," she declared, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. "He's always been so kind to us." Peter nodded vigorously, his tousled hair bouncing with each movement. "But what can we do?" he asked, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We haven't got any money for a proper present." Phyllis, the youngest, piped up, her face scrunched in deep thought. "What if we ask the village to help?" she suggested, her eyes widening with excitement. "Everyone loves Perks." The idea took root, growing like a sapling in spring. Soon the children were dashing from house to house, their cheeks flushed with exertion and anticipation. They painted vivid pictures of Perks' kindness, his dedication to the railway, and his friendship to all. Their words were like seeds planted in the hearts of the villagers, who responded with warmth and generosity. As donations poured in, the children's excitement swelled like a river after a rainstorm. They imagined Perks's face lighting up, his gruff exterior melting away to reveal the gentle soul they knew lurked beneath. The gifts were a hodgepodge of items, practical things like warm socks and homemade jams, alongside small luxuries that Perks would never buy for himself. On the morning of Perks' birthday, the air was thick with anticipation. The children set off for the station, their arms laden with parcels wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. The gifts clinked and rustled with each step, a symphony of good intentions. The gravel crunched beneath their feet as they approached the station, their hearts pounding with excitement. But as they presented their surprise to Perks, the atmosphere shifted like a sudden change in the wind. Perks's face, usually ruddy and cheerful, darkened like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. His voice, normally warm and welcoming, turned as cold and hard as the rails of his beloved train tracks. "What's all this, then?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing to slits. "I don't need no charity, thank you very much." The children's hearts sank like stones in a pond. They stammered and stumbled over their words, trying to explain that it wasn't charity at all, but a gesture of friendship and appreciation. But Perks's pride was a fortress, and their words bounced off its walls like rubber balls. Bobbie, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind, tried to make Perks understand. "We never meant to insult you," she said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We just wanted to show you how much you mean to us, to everyone in the village." For a moment, the silence stretched between them like an endless railway track. The only sound was the distant whistle of a train and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Then slowly, like the sun peeking through clouds after a storm, understanding dawned on Perks's face. His expression softened, the hard lines around his mouth easing into the hint of a smile. "Well now," he said, his voice gruff but no longer angry, "I suppose I might have jumped to conclusions there. It's just..." Well, a man's got his pride, you see. The children nodded eagerly, relief washing over them like a cool breeze on a hot day. They watched as Perks began to unwrap the gifts, his initial reluctance giving way to genuine pleasure. With each present revealed, the bonds of friendship between them grew stronger, like the roots of an old oak tree reaching deep into the earth. As the last gift was opened and admired, Perks looked at the children, his eyes twinkling with a mixture of gratitude and affection. "Thank you," he said simply, but those two words carried the weight of 1,000. The children left the station that day with light hearts and valuable lessons learned. They had navigated the treacherous waters of pride and sensitivity and emerged with their friendship not just intact, but strengthened. As they walked home, the setting sun painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, a fitting end to a day that had begun with good intentions, stumbled through misunderstanding, and concluded with the warm glow of true friendship. As they neared their house, Bobbie noticed a discarded newspaper on the ground. Something about the bold headline caught her eye, and she bent to pick it up. Her siblings continued on, chattering happily about the day's events. But as Bobbie's eyes scanned the article, her world began to tilt on its axis. Her breath caught in her throat, and her hands began to tremble. The words on the page blurred as tears filled her eyes, but one sentence stood out with terrible clarity. It was about her father, and it would change everything. Bobbie's world shattered in an instant. She stumbled upon a newspaper article that revealed the shocking truth about her father's imprisonment. The kitchen, usually a haven of warmth and comfort, suddenly felt cold and alien. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting cheerful patterns on the worn wooden floor. But Bobbie couldn't feel its warmth. Her hands trembled as she held the paper, the black ink seeming to dance on the page. The words blurred as tears welled up, threatening to spill over. She blinked hard, forcing herself to read every painful detail. Each word felt like a punch to her gut, leaving her breathless and dizzy. The distant laughter of Peter and Phyllis playing in the garden pierced her heart like tiny daggers, a stark reminder of the innocence she was about to lose. As the full weight of the revelation settled on her shoulders, Bobbie felt as if she had aged years in mere moments. The carefree girl who had woken up that morning was gone, replaced by someone carrying a burden too heavy for her young years. Her chest tightened, an unfamiliar ache spreading through her body as she thought of her father locked away in a cold, dark cell. The newspaper crinkled as she folded it with shaking hands, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet kitchen. Her mind raced, thoughts tumbling over each other like stones in a fast-moving stream. In that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. She would protect Peter and Phyllis from this harsh truth, shield them from the pain that now threatened to consume her. The secret settled in her chest like a heavy stone, making it hard to breathe. She forced a smile onto her face, a mask to hide the turmoil within. As she stepped out into the garden, the sunlight felt harsh on her skin, as if even nature knew of her deception. "Come play with us, Bob," Peter called, waving a wooden sword in the air. His face was bright with innocence, untouched by the shadows that now clouded Bobbie's world. Bobbie's heart clenched. How could she join their game when her world had just shattered? But she knew she must, for their sake. She plastered on a wider smile and ran towards them, her feet feeling like lead. The grass tickled her ankles, a sensation that would have delighted her just hours ago, but now felt like tiny needles pricking her skin. As she played, laughed, and pretended everything was normal, Bobbie felt a chasm growing between her and her siblings. She was now part of the adult world of secrets and sorrows, while they remained blissfully unaware in their childhood paradise. The weight of her newfound knowledge pressed down on her, a constant reminder of the harsh realities of the world. Yet as she watched Peter and Phyllis giggle and play, their laughter bubbling up like a clear spring, she knew she had made the right choice. Their joy was a balm to her aching heart, a reminder of the innocence she was fighting to protect. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Bobbie felt the first stirrings of a new strength within her. This secret, this burden, was hers to bear. And bear it she would, for the love of her family. The fading light painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, a beautiful sight that now seemed bittersweet to Bobbie. The day drew to a close, And as Bobbie tucked her siblings into bed, she felt the full weight of her new responsibilities. She was no longer just their sister. She was their protector, their shield against the harsh truths of the world. As she kissed them goodnight, their soft breathing and peaceful faces a stark contrast to the turmoil in her heart, she silently vowed to keep them safe, no matter the cost to herself. In the quiet of her own room, Bobbie finally allowed her tears to fall. They streamed down her face, hot and silent, as she grappled with the enormity of what she had learned and the decisions she had made. This moment marked a turning point in her young life, a step into a world of adult concerns and responsibilities that she could never have imagined. As she drifted off to sleep, exhausted by the emotional toll of the day, Bobbie's last thoughts were of her father. She sent a silent prayer into the night, hoping it would somehow reach him in his lonely cell. And with that, she surrendered to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges as she continued to protect her siblings from the truth that now weighed so heavily on her heart. But as the first light of dawn crept through her window, Bobbie stirred, an inexplicable sense of anticipation settling over her. Something in the air felt different, charged with possibility. Little did she know that the day ahead would test her resolve in ways she could never have imagined. The air was thick with anticipation, the gentle rustling of leaves and distant chirping of birds, doing little to ease the tension that had settled over Bobbie, Peter, and Phyllis. Their hearts beat in sync with the rhythmic clacking of the tracks, a sound that had become as familiar to them as their own breathing. Suddenly their eyes widened in disbelief. A massive oak tree lay sprawled across the rails, its gnarled branches reaching out like desperate fingers. The usually straight and orderly tracks now bent and twisted beneath its weight, a jarring sight that sent shivers down their spines. "Oh no!" Bobbie gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of impending disaster. "What if a train comes?" As if summoned by her fear, a distant whistle pierced the air. The children exchanged panicked glances, their minds racing to find a solution. The whistle grew louder, each blast a reminder of the lives at stake. Peter's eyes suddenly lit up with an idea. "Our petticoats!" he exclaimed, turning to his sisters. "We can use them as a flag to warn the train." Without hesitation, Bobbie and Phyllis began to remove their red petticoats. The soft fabric, usually hidden beneath their skirts, now became their beacon of hope. As they waved the makeshift flags frantically, the sound of the approaching train grew deafening. The children's hearts pounded in their chests, each beat seeming to echo the rhythmic chug of the oncoming locomotive. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, their arms aching from the effort of waving. Their voices grew hoarse from shouting, but they refused to give up. Time seemed to slow as the train came into view, a massive iron beast barreling towards them. The children's world narrowed to this moment, their entire beings focused on being seen, on preventing tragedy. Just when all hope seemed lost, they heard it, the ear-splitting screech of brakes. The train slowed, metal grinding against metal in a cacophony of salvation. It ground to a halt mere yards from the fallen tree, steam hissing from its sides like a sigh of relief. As passengers and crew poured out to investigate, the children found themselves at the center of attention once again. Their quick thinking and bravery had prevented what could have been a terrible disaster. The station master approached, his face a mixture of gratitude and awe. "You've done it again," he said, shaking his head in amazement. "You truly are the guardians of our railway." As word of their heroic deeds spread, the children's reputation grew even stronger. They had once again proven themselves to be not just observers of the railway, but its protectors. Standing there surrounded by thankful passengers and crew, they felt a sense of pride and purpose that warmed them from the inside out. Yet, as the excitement began to die down and the reality of their situation set in, a shadow of worry crossed Bobbie's face. She turned to her siblings, her voice low. "We've saved the day, but what about tomorrow? And the day after that? How long can we keep being heroes when we can barely keep ourselves afloat?" Peter and Phyllis exchanged concerned glances, the weight of their family struggles suddenly feeling heavier than ever. As they made their way home, their steps were slower, their shoulders slightly slumped. Little did they know, Their actions had caught the attention of someone who could change their fortunes. The old gentleman, a frequent passenger on the line, had witnessed their bravery from afar. As he watched the children disappear down the path, a plan began to form in his mind. Perhaps it was time for these young heroes to receive some help of their own. The old gentleman had been profoundly affected by the children's numerous acts of kindness. Their current predicament tugged at his heartstrings, compelling him to take action on their behalf. The study was bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun as the old gentleman settled into his plush armchair. The room smelled of old books and polished wood, a comforting scent that usually calmed his nerves. But today his mind was restless, filled with thoughts of the family he had grown to care for so deeply. He gazed out the window, watching as a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree in the garden. The peaceful scene outside contrasted sharply with the turmoil in his heart. The image of the children's faces, their eyes bright with hope yet shadowed by worry, was etched in his memory like an old photograph. With a determined sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, he pushed himself up from the chair. His joints creaked in protest, reminding him of the passage of time. But age had not dimmed his spirit or his resolve. He made his way to his desk, a grand mahogany piece that had been in his family for generations. As he ran his hand over its smooth surface, he could almost feel the weight of the important decisions it had witnessed. Today, it would bear witness to another. The old gentleman's fingers, weathered but still nimble, reached for his address book. The leather cover was soft and worn, a testament to its frequent use. As he flipped through the pages, names and numbers blurred together, each one a potential lifeline in his quest to help the children. He began making calls, his voice carrying a mix of urgency and authority. With each conversation, he pieced together fragments of information about the children's father and his mysterious imprisonment. It was like trying to solve a complex puzzle without knowing what the final picture should look like. As the day wore on, shadows lengthened across the study floor. The old gentleman barely noticed the fading light, too engrossed in his mission. His eyes, though tired, sparkled with determination behind his spectacles as he scribbled notes and connected dots. Outside, the world continued its usual rhythm. The distant whistle of a train echoed through the valley, a poignant reminder of the life the children had built near the railway. The sound seemed to carry with it the hopes and dreams of the family he was trying to help, spurring him on in his efforts. With each new piece of information, the old gentleman's resolve strengthened. He felt like a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of events that would hopefully lead to a harmonious resolution. The children's plight had awakened something in him, a fierce desire to right a wrong, to bring light where there was darkness. As night fell, casting long shadows across his study, the old gentleman leaned back in his chair. His back ached from hours of hunching over his desk, but he barely noticed the discomfort. He had set the wheels in motion, like a complex train network coming to life. Now all he could do was wait and hope that the tracks he had laid would lead to a brighter future for the family. He closed his eyes, exhausted but satisfied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities. And he was ready to face them all, for the sake of 3 children who had touched his heart in ways he never expected. As he was about to retire for the night, the telephone rang, its shrill sound piercing the quiet of the study. The old gentleman's heart raced as he reached for the receiver. Could this be the breakthrough he had been waiting for? His hand trembled slightly as he lifted the phone to his ear, his voice barely above a whisper as he answered, "Hello?" The old gentleman's tireless efforts had finally borne fruit. New evidence had come to light, promising to prove the innocence of the children's father. The early morning sun painted the modest country home in a soft, golden glow. Its warm rays seeped through the delicate lace curtains, casting intricate patterns on the worn wooden floor. In the cozy living room, the air was thick with anticipation, crackling like static electricity before a storm. Roberta, Peter, and Phyllis huddled around their mother, their eyes wide and hearts pounding. Mother's hands trembled as she clutched a letter from the old gentleman, the paper crinkling softly under her nervous fingers. "Children," Mother began, her voice barely above a whisper, "the old gentleman has found something that might bring your father back to us." The words hung in the air, heavy with hope and possibility. Peter's fist clenched and unclenched at his sides, his knuckles turning white with each squeeze. Phyllis clutched her favorite doll, a threadbare rabbit with floppy ears, pressing it tightly against her chest as if it could anchor her in this moment of overwhelming emotion. Roberta, ever the pillar of strength, placed a comforting hand on Mother's shoulder, her touch steady despite the tremor in her heart. As Mother read the letter aloud, each word seemed to breathe new life into their weary souls. The old gentleman had uncovered documents that cast doubt on the original charges against Father. Like a lighthouse piercing through a fog of despair, this new evidence illuminated a path towards justice. Days melted into weeks, and weeks stretched into months. The wheels of justice ground forward at an agonizingly slow pace. The children found themselves on an emotional roller coaster, their spirits soaring with hope one moment, only to plummet with each new delay or setback. During these tumultuous times, they clung to each other like survivors in a storm-tossed sea, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Roberta would often sit by the window, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon, imagining her father walking up the winding path to their home. Peter threw himself into projects around the house, his hands busy even as his mind raced with thoughts of reunion. Phyllis filled page after page with colorful drawings of their family, always complete with Father at the center. The changing seasons painted the countryside in vibrant hues, from the lush greens of summer to the fiery reds and golds of autumn. And still, they waited. Finally, on a crisp autumn morning, when the air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke, the news they had been yearning for arrived. It came not with a bang, but with the gentle thud of a letter dropping through the mail slot. Mother's hand shook as she opened the envelope, her eyes scanning the contents rapidly. The truth of their father's wrongful imprisonment had been revealed, as clear and undeniable as the blue sky above. The evidence painstakingly gathered by the old gentleman had withstood the scrutiny of the courts, and justice had prevailed. "He's coming home," Mother whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Your father is coming home." The words hung in the air for a moment before erupting into a cacophony of joyous cries and sobs. The children danced around the room, their faces streaked with happy tears, their laughter ringing out like bells. As the day of Father's return drew near, the family gathered on the platform of their beloved railway station, the very place where their adventures had begun. The familiar sounds of the station surrounded them, the hiss of steam, the clank of metal on metal, the murmur of travelers. But today, these sounds seemed charged with an electric anticipation. Roberta stood tall, her eyes fixed on the bend in the tracks where the train would first appear. Peter bounced on his toes, unable to contain his excitement. Phyllis clutched her mother's hand, her other arm wrapped tightly around her beloved rabbit doll. The distant whistle of an approaching train sent their hearts racing. Was this the one? Would this train bring their father back to them? As the train pulled into the station, time seemed to slow. Passengers began to disembark, a sea of unfamiliar faces. And then, like a dream come to life, they saw him. Father stepped onto the platform, his face etched with lines of hardship, but his eyes shining with love and relief. For a moment, the world stood still. Then, with cries of joy, the family rushed forward, colliding in a tangle of arms and tears and laughter. In that moment, as they clung to each other on the crowded platform, all the pain and uncertainty of the past melted away like morning mist. Their faith in their father had been vindicated, their family made whole once more. As they walked home together, their laughter echoing through the countryside, they knew that this was not just an ending, but a new beginning. The railway children had weathered the storm, and now with their family reunited, they were ready to embark on new adventures, stronger and more united than ever before. Yet, as they approached their modest home, a shadow of doubt crossed Father's face. He paused at the gate, his hand resting on the familiar wood. What changes awaited him beyond that threshold? How would he fit into the life his family had built in his absence? As the children tugged him forward, eager to show him all he had missed, Father took a deep breath and stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in reclaiming his place in their lives. Father's long-awaited release had finally arrived. The day of his return home had come, bringing with it a surge of hope and excitement for the family. The railway station hummed with an electric energy, the air thick with anticipation. Bobbie stood on the platform, her heart pounding like a steam engine in her chest. It was her birthday, but thoughts of celebration were far from her mind. Instead, her imagination raced with visions of her father's return, a dream she had clung to through countless lonely nights. The distant whistle of the approaching train cut through the air, growing louder with each passing moment. Bobbie's breath caught in her throat as the great iron beast pulled into the station, billowing clouds of steam that swirled around her ankles like ghostly fingers. Her eyes darted from face to face, searching desperately for the one she longed to see. And then, like a mirage becoming real, there he was. Father stepped off the train, his familiar silhouette emerging from the steam. The lines of worry etched on his face seemed to melt away as his gaze met Bobbie's across the crowded platform. Time stood still, the bustle of the station fading to a distant hum. "Father!" Bobbie's cry rang out, a sound of pure, unbridled joy that cut through the noise like a knife. In an instant, she was running, her feet barely touching the ground. The world blurred around her, narrowing to a single point, her father's outstretched arms. She flew into his embrace, burying her face in the rough fabric of his coat. The familiar scent of pipe tobacco and old books enveloped her, and suddenly she was home. Tears streamed down Bobbie's face, hot and salty against her lips. Father held her tight, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "My dear, dear girl," he whispered, his voice rough with feeling, like sandpaper on silk. The rest of the family wasn't far behind. Mother, Peter, and Phyllis rushed forward, creating a tangle of arms and laughter and happy sobs. They clung to each other like survivors of a shipwreck, a family made whole again after so long adrift. As they embraced, the world around them seemed to fade away. The clamor of the station, the curious glances of onlookers, even the great steam engine puffing nearby, all of it receded into the background. In that moment, there was only the warmth of their reunion, as precious and fragile as a soap bubble catching the light. Slowly, they became aware of the crowd gathering around them. Their new friends from the village and the railway stood nearby, beaming with shared happiness. The station master dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief, and even the usually gruff old porter wore a smile that crinkled his weathered face. As the initial rush of emotion began to settle, the children found themselves reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They thought of the challenges they had faced, the friendships they had forged, and the strength they had discovered within themselves. Bobbie, her hand firmly clasped in her father's, realized how much they had all grown. They were no longer the same children who had arrived in the village, bewildered and afraid. They had learned the value of perseverance, the power of kindness, and the importance of never losing hope, even in the darkest of times. Peter stood a little taller, his chest puffed out with pride at how he had stepped up to help the family. Phyllis's eyes shone with newfound wisdom beyond her years, a testament to the hardships they had endured together. And Bobbie, her heart full to bursting, knew that this moment, this perfect, joyous moment, made all the trials and tribulations worthwhile. As they walked out of the station together, a family reunited, they were surrounded by their new friends from the village and railway. The warm summer air carried the scent of wildflowers and possibility. The children exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the bond that had grown between them through their shared experiences. The long ordeal was finally over, but the love and strength it had revealed would remain with them always. As they stepped into the sunlight, ready to begin the next chapter of their lives, Bobbie felt a sense of peace wash over her. The railway children had come home at last, not just to their father, but to themselves.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.